everybody. Let's do these next four together at the board, at least two of them at the board. -2 times 3. -2 times 3. Now, one way to do this, of course, is just plug it into your calculator and hit enter and see what you get. Another way to do it, though, is remember what multiplication means. What does it mean to take 3 times something? If you remember, it means to add it 3 times. So it's going to be -2 plus -2 plus -2. So you can rewrite multiplication as addition, which is, I mean, that's why we had multiplication in the first place, was we got tired of adding all the time. But I think it helps in this case to look back at it to see what actually is happening. And then you can just use what we just learned about adding negative numbers, which is the same as subtracting positive numbers. So -2 plus -2 is the same as -2 minus 2 minus 2. So if you start at -2 and then move 2 to the left, that's -4, and then move 2 more to the left, that's -6. Now some of you might look at that and go, wait a minute, I could have figured that out back up there. Because I know that 2 times 3 is 6. -2 times 3 has to be the opposite of 6. Exactly. Keep that in mind. Let's do one more. Okay, 4 times -8. We can look at it the same way. Multiplying something times 4 means adding it to itself 4 times. There you go. That's the same thing as that. And then using what we just learned about negatives. That's -8 minus 8 minus 8 minus 8. And then order of operations says go to the right. So if you start at -8 and then move to the left 8 more, that's -16. Then move to the left 8 more, it's -24, and then move to the left 8 more, it's -32. And then some of you, of course, are going to look up there and say, wait a minute, if it were just 4 times 8, it would be 32. So if it's got to be -8, it's got to be the opposite of 32, which is -32. And I think what we're getting at here is we're actually answering number 20 and 21. When you multiply a positive by a negative, the result is, as we just saw, negative. And then, why is this the case? So there's a couple ways you can think about it. One way is what we just looked at. When you multiply a negative times a positive, you're taking the negative a positive number of times added together. If you keep adding negative numbers to more negative numbers, you're going to stay a negative number. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is looking at the idea of opposites. Multiplying a positive times a negative has to be the opposite of multiplying a positive times a positive. And a positive times a positive is hopefully pretty straightforward. You've been doing it since you were tiny. It's going to be positive. So a positive times a positive times a negative has to be the opposite of that, which would be negative. I know it sounds a little bit kind of like, because we're throwing the words positive and negative around, but if you think about it, we're actually breaking it down pretty specifically. When you involve a negative sign, for each negative sign, you do the opposite of what it would be if it were a positive sign. So adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. That's the opposite. Multiplying a negative is the opposite of multiplying a positive. So that's the kind of the nice way of thinking about negatives. Think of them as opposite. Because think about where they are on the number line. You've got 0 in the middle, and then you've got positive 1s and negative 1s, and positive 2s and negative 2s, and positive 3s and negative 3s. Think of them that way, and negatives seem a little less scary. All right, let's try some more.